joining us via HD video, and I'm like, man, you look 10 years younger. What's going on? He said, well, look, it's great not flying back and forth to Congress. That's what's great. So it is wonderful, former Congressman Paul, to join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Well, where should we start today?
Well, there's so many places. Government keeps growing. That bothers me. I started out a long time ago in the 70s worrying about too much spending, too much debt, and the government's too big, and supported a lot of people along the way. And there have been a lot of promises, and generally I've been disappointed. You know, the Reagan years were the time when I was most optimistic, and yet by the end of 8 years I was pretty disappointed. The spending continued. Our presence around the world got bigger. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed on what's going to happen with this administration, because I still hear mixed signals, you know, about what's going to happen. I worry a little bit about the connection that the new administration has with Goldman Sachs. It used to be we were worried about Goldman Sachs, but it looks like now they've gotten inside the White House, and there's something to be concerned about. And we don't know. We have to believe that Trump will continue to do what he said he wants to do. But when some of these individuals, you know, get into the Treasury and they say, hey, you know, I don't know about this art of the Fed business. That might not be a good idea. So we need, Alex, to remain vigilant and be careful and call things as we see them.
Dr. Paul, I absolutely agree with you 100%. But if you look at Bannon, who was former Goldman Sachs, he's anti-globalist, pro-America, and they're delivering. If you look at the other fella, I mean, he's been anti-NAFTA and GATT. I mean, can't we say, though, that Trump is really trying to deliver on a lot of promises, pulling us out of TPP day one, you know, signaling that we're going to try to cut our corporate tax so we can be competitive?
Yeah, I think he's changing the whole nature of the international order. But I don't think we're going to have a less presence. When you hear him talk about going any place, every place, and we have to totally eradicate, you know, an ideological movement, which is radical Islam, you know, that's sort of like taking on communism, which was an ideological issue that we defeated without a war and without bombing anybody, and they were vicious and mean and nasty. So yes, it's a mixed bag, but I think what you're talking about is good, because the conventional international order, you know, he doesn't not seem to fit in. I think he wants to control it. But there was a time, you know, during the campaign, you and I talked about NATO, and we, you know, we don't ever get too excited about NATO and going to war for NATO, and he said some great things about that. But let's wait and see what happens, because some of his appointees sort of like NATO and have indicated that we'll go along with what they do, and as long as they follow our policy, and that's good for us to look at it that way. But that also is a red flag for other countries. But you know what I am. I'm a non-interventionist. I don't like entangling alliances. I don't want to have anything to do with NATO, United Nations. I think that's, you know, all a danger to us, and that's what I've been fighting for. So I watch carefully of the individuals who have been living under those conditions. The military people certainly have been mixed in with that a lot, too. So, and there's no indication that the military-industrial complex is going to have less influence. I'm worried about that, because they won't look at the difference between military spending and defense spending. They still talk about defense spending. I don't want to cut a penny out of defense, but I do want to slash military spending, because it's nothing more than getting us into mischief around the world and incentivizing these people to come and get us. And as long as we do that, we're going to have a problem. So I want a stronger defense by having a changed foreign policy, and also to separate the two between military and also, you know, defense. And I think Trump does say some things about, you know, cracking down on some of the waste and fraud. But I also think it's very important to know what our policies are. Are we truly the policemen of the world? And, of course, I think that's a dangerous position.
Well, he did just put a federal hiring freeze in. He did just announce all these regulations that are designed so companies can't operate are gone. And I did love one big thing he did. When he announced we're pulling out of TPP, he didn't reserve it and say he's going to, you know, oversee it with Congress and renegotiate it. He said it's unconstitutional. They had no authority to negotiate it. The president didn't. It's just dead. I mean, right there, he handed power back to Congress, back to the states, back to the people. He didn't say, oh, I'm going to renegotiate it. That's a big sign. I mean, Ron Paul, isn't it exciting? Because I know you're not just a cheerleader for Trump. I'm just super excited because here he is saying Americanism, not globalism. It's we the people that have the power. We're going to give the power back to you. You are what is important. We have a bunch of elites up here that are arrogant, calling the media out for being fake. You've exposed that as well. I mean, they just do outrageous stuff. Major media said that I got arrested at the Trump rally and thrown out. No, they had communists attacking me. The police protected me. I mean, the MSM has only seemed to double down in their deception.
Well, I think you're right about the TPP. I'm delighted. I don't want to get anywhere close to that. We need to get rid of the WTO and the UN and all that other business. But, the freeze on employees of the government has been very limited because he did not put that into the military. That's not going to be expanded. So they're going to cut Social Security, which was a proposal of the OMB director, the new one, and they're going to spend more money on the military and not on national defense. So I think there's some significance there because they don't ever talk about. There are, for every 100 people we have in the military, we have 60 civilians in there. They're involved. And it's our civilians that go overseas and fight these wars. And they're the contractor. They're the Halliburtons. They're the ones that are on the gravy train. And they're not even counted, and they're not even counted as employees. But it still costs a lot of money. So if you've been in the military and you're a grunt, and then you finally go and join Halliburton, then you get over and send it to these areas where we're still fighting. We're in 7 countries right now. So, and that's what I hope. If in a year from now, if we're in a lot less than 7 countries, then I'm going to say, great, move on. But right now, I'm watching carefully because I think it's really, really hard to use as an example turning around an aircraft carrier. It's very, very difficult. And the momentum of the military-industrial complex and the influence of Goldman Sachs is so great that it's going to be very, very hard.
Sure, but he did pass.
We do have hints from Trump.
Sure, but he did pass a big test when he de-escalated with Russia, says we shouldn't be massing troops on their border. Because that's totally illegitimate. The problem is Hillary and Obama and Kerry, they've been caught in the memos, the WikiLeaks. Kerry's been caught on tape helping create ISIS out of al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, Saudi Arabia. They have a deal with them to expand Islamic Jihad, Wahhabism worldwide. So I agree with you in your op-ed where you said, is Trump being consistent, being anti-war? But it's not war if we're cleaning up a mess that our own country created with al-Qaeda pouring into Europe, creating a bigger crisis. I mean, isn't it just to go in there and kick them out of Syria or at least let the Russians do it?
Not from my viewpoint. This is where we can disagree because I say just come home. We've created it and being there is just going to escalate. And this whole thing, I think, and I praise Trump when I think he does right, especially with Russia. Why are these people wanting the neocons to stir up a fight with Russia? But why do we have to stir up a fight with China and say, well, you built a little island out there and it's a mile long and we're not going to let you do this? And that's just a threat. And I think this protectionism and threatening China and shifting gears, isn't it? You treat them all the same way. I just think that...
Well, China's been threatening to attack the U.S. Sure. But, I mean, China's been... Here's the thing. We have agreements with China, and this is the old global order. It's falling apart. But the reason Trump's making his point is the old global order, the globalist setup was already falling apart. China had the deal for exclusive rare earth minerals and manufacturing. We were going to let them dominate that. We would dominate military. They broke that deal. I disagree, as you do, with the whole deal they've had, since Nixon. So what do we put in place of that? I don't want world order. I don't want a world government. But how do we not let the normal evil forces come in then and take advantage of the chaos?
But the people that are dealing with it, there's a mess over in Ukraine and we precipitated it. Just get out of there and let the local people support this out. But this whole idea about China and worrying about China attacking the United States, they have one aircraft carrier, and we spend so much. We spend more money than the next 10 countries together. And yet we're still, you're right in criticizing this preparation for war against Russia, and Trump wants to settle that down. That's very good. But why transfer it? That's Kissinger's position. Keep the Chinese fighting with the Russians and separate the two because we don't want them to be allies. So now our position is to go after the Chinese. You know, I was in high school when the Chinese were fighting and killing people, including one of my teachers who was over to Korea. And it's so much different now. I think we should trade. There's never been any interruption in the South China Sea with. Well,
I agree. I don't want war with sir. I don't want war. I don't want war with China at all. I don't like them. I don't like them buying up Hollywood and trying to control what we do here. Let me bring this up though, because it deals with the press and attacks on freedom. There's a big call for Trump to move to repeal the law that Obama signed, federalizing media, putting the CIA over it. This Truth Department at the State Department. There's also all 50 state attorney generals have asked him to not let Homeland Security federalize elections. You're a constitutionalist. You're more of an expert than probably any of us on this. I mean, isn't it already super unconstitutional to have the federal government over the media, A? And then B, what about this whole thing where they're calling for Homeland Security? Well, they've done it to federalize elections.
Yeah, and that's why I fear, that we're militarizing the Department of Homeland Security. I think and you know darn well what I thought of Homeland Security after 9/11. I voted adamantly opposed to the Department of Homeland Security. Now it's bigger than ever. So, and the CIA, if you're a strict constitutionalist, you allow the gathering of intelligence, but you don't allow the cloak and dagger stuff, where the CIA works with the special forces and goes around the world. And believe me, that is going to accelerate because we're going to go anywhere, every place that there's a suspect, not where we've proven anything, but he's suspected that he could commit terrorism, that we're going to go after him. I say, just get out of this.
Well, I can tell you,
I mean, this is how you create the hatred toward us, is by people have to understand what blowback really is. And I'm a strong believer in blowback. There is a reaction, and it incites people who are already borderline in their thinking. So why do that? It's like poking at rattlesnakes and jumping into the snake.
Sure. Well, UN President
just has to.
UN President Trump agreed back in 2003, and I was anti-war, as you know. You were coming on at the time, pointing out why it was wrong to go into Iraq. They'd been our ally previous, and they were secular. I mean, one of the better regimes in the area. Certainly not our business. Right. So Trump was right about that. You were right about that. His point is we've got to get the Saudi Arabian expansion under control, or it will be an ongoing war and cause crisis. He wants to actually stamp it out, not go in and stir it up. He wants to kick it out of the West. And I do think that Trump is going to be militaristic and basically no limit when it comes to taking out the Islamic Jihad.
Well, cross your fingers on that one, I'll tell you. I don't think it has anything to do with national defense. I think that has to do with ego. And I think the sooner we realize that, the better off we're going to be. And we have to understand what the reason is. And Saudi Arabia, I mean, there's people, even the Secretary of State now is somewhat sympathetic to the Saudis. And the Saudis are the ones that we, deal with. Our CIA deals with them. And they radicalized the Muslims to help defeat the Soviet system in Afghanistan. And then as time went on, they turned on us.
No, I get it.
So
blowback.
I think we should stay out of that. Yeah, we have to realize that is very, very dangerous. There's a lot of problems in the world, and
I understand you're a long-term thinker, and I respect that. You're a long-term thinker. Speaking of media attacks, you have been called basically a Russian agent. I have been called one. Trump has been called one. All these fake revelations have come out. None of them are true. It's totally made up, and that's how they passed that law to, quote, try to control U.S. media, is because, quote, the Russians are so powerful. They even claim now that Drain the Swamp and Crooked Hillary came from Putin with no evidence. What do you make of this? I mean, this is like McCarthy on PCP.
Yeah, that was the word I was thinking about as you were saying that. It's the McCarthyism. Yeah, they try to destroy people who come up with a messenger. You know, somebody called in when my name was on that list, and they were a little bit worried about it. And my staff said, no, that's good news. That's good news. We're on the right side, you know, of them attacking us because they want to destroy us because they're afraid of the truth. You know, we're telling the truth, and they have to close you down by demagoguing and lying about us. So I think there are healthy things. Right now, I think the best thing, and Trump's done a good job on this, is debunking, you know, so much of the media. There's so little trust in the government. That's why Trump won, and rightfully so. I think 70-80% of the American people don't even believe what government tells us, but they don't believe the major medias anymore. So I don't think we have to lecture them and say, oh, don't believe what you know, major media is saying. They don't believe it anyway, but we still have a long way to convince people of what the alternative should be. And, of course, I try to be as precise as I can and as balanced as I can because I know it's against the rules if you identify as a Republican congressman that if a Democrat president does something halfway decent, you compliment on it. I happen to think it's a great idea that we can talk to the Cubans. And if that is canceled, I think that's a step backwards to the dark ages. You know, I was drafted during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the longer we sanctioned Cubans and we pestered them like that, the longer Castro stayed in power. So it's time to get a life.
Well, your logic has been
your logic
has been proven right, and President Trump's called you super smart. So I hope he'll confer with you and get some of your advice. Get some of your advice on this. In the few minutes we've got left, I want to speak about the nature of the division in this country. I went out to the so-called female march against Trump on Saturday in D.C. Yeah. We let them have their march and didn't attack them. They attacked anybody trying to go into the Trump inauguration. The media has been caught lying about the numbers. It's just incredible. And I see the division. I was screamed at over 300 times that I was an effing white male by mainly white women. The Democratic Party has been turned so racist and so mind-controlled. I'm really worried about civil insurrection in this country. There's a big article out today in New Yorker magazine about that the elites are actually leaving the U.S. So I've been positive so far, but I just hope that Trump can unify the country. We can come together. As he said, don't conquer the world, you know, with military, but have America be a shining city on the hill, that our ideas are what, you know, basically spreads across the world. So do you have concerns about Soros and others that admit they're trying to fund civil war in America?
Well, I think it's not so much that people are sitting there and working on it, which I'm sure there are some that do that, but I think policies that we have designed, you know, incrementally over the last 100 years have worked us into this position because it's a failed system. Just as Mises lectured many, many years before communism failed, he explained why socialism always fails and communism would fail, and we didn't have to have a fight and a war with them. So, but the same rules apply to Keynesianism, interventionism, Federal Reserve inflationism, militarism. It fails. All empires end, and we're the empire. And it's going to end. It's going to be for economic reasons. It's not because the Russians are coming, and it's not going to be because the Chinese are coming, and the Iranians aren't going to get us. And we're going to fail because we're working with a failed system, especially in this century. In the last 17 years, it's been a disaster. And Trump was able to recognize this and go to the people who have suffered the most. But this is a monetary problem. This is a spending problem. This is a foreign policy problem. And that is what's going to bring us down. Is going to be financial, and it's going to be associated with horrendous increases in spending and also inflation. And yet we still have a policy where they deliberately try to devalue
In closing, how long do you think Trump has to try to reverse that, because we're so far down the road? I know he's making hundreds of calls a day to get jobs back. He does want to cut taxes. He also wants to cut spending. I mean, what needs to be done to right the ship?
Well, I'll tell you what, he has a short amount of time, and I think he's sincerely trying. And when he talks about taxes and regulation, I think he's doing a great job. But the whole thing is, let's say there are some dire predictions that, you know, next year, or say a year and 18 months, we have something arriving worse than 2008 and 2009. The downturn is much worse. And they'll say, it's all Trump's fault, it's all Trump's fault. No, it wasn't. 08 and 09 wasn't Obama's fault. It was the fault of the Federal Reserve. It was the fault of the Keynesian economic model, the spending too much, the deficit. So, unfortunately, there's nothing he can do. Trump can't do it. He can help, by some of these policies, but you can't avoid the correction. The correction is locked in place because the deficits are there, the malinvestment. Everybody agrees.
That's right.
Interest rates have been too low, too long,
and that's why he's racing.
The only thing he can do is allow the recession to come and get it over with, liquidate the debt. Politically, nobody wants that, so you're going to see runaway inflation before you see this country wake up.
Dr. Ron Paul, thank you so much. We salute you. RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Thank you, sir.